And yeah, overall the week's been or last week was pretty decent. I'm recording this on Monday. Yeah, it was pretty good, and of course I'm trapped inside like everyone else in the world. But it's I'm starting to get used to it. I'm starting to get used to creating in captivity, I guess. One thing this has shown me though, I could never go to prison. Oh my goodness, I wouldn't last a day. I'm struggling with internet, Wi-Fi, and ample food, and I'm just still like losing my mind. So yeah, so without further ado, let's get into the creative discussion segment for this week's episode, which is basically going to be just me reminiscing on past episodes. But if you haven't heard, say, the past 50 episodes of MugenCast, this is a good episode to pick it up on because I'll be discussing some of the best episodes. You can go back and listen to those, get a gist of what the podcast is, and go from there, hopefully. So without further ado, let's get into it. I have a lot of stuff to talk about today, so I'm going to have to use my phone. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, I wish I had some more. Yeah, talking for 45 minutes at a time is really difficult without water. And of course, I forgot to bring myself a bottle of water, but whatever. So how did MugenCast start? I get this question actually a lot from, friends and family and stuff like that, of what made me want to start a podcast. Because when I started my podcast, that's when podcasts kind of exploded, I guess. So a lot of people think I just created it as a part of that trend, which isn't really true. When I created MugenCast, I actually wasn't really into podcasts in general. I maybe watched like a few sports podcasts, like The Starters, if you've heard of them, The Stars NBA, which are now no dunk since they got dropped by the NBA, unfortunately. Listen to that, maybe listen to a little bit of First Take, stuff like that. But I never really listened to creativity podcasts or anything like that. I wasn't a big podcast listener like I am now. But I just thought a podcast was a good idea. I was like, I have so many things to talk about. And so I think so much valuable information to give to other people. Why don't I just create a podcast where I can do long form audio? And also simultaneously at this time, I was building my website, building out my brand, and building out some of the larger fundamental things that we know to be a part of Mugen now. And I was also, while doing this, going to an internship. I missed the second N on there. But yeah, I was going back and forth to an internship in the city. I live in Pennsylvania, by the way, in case you guys don't know. So I was going back and forth to Philadelphia. This is when I was back in college. And I hated that internship. Oh my goodness. I hated it with every fiber of my being. It was so irrelevant to what I was interested in. I didn't like it. I thought it was boring. And it just overall felt like a gigantic waste of my time. And by this point, I had created a few episodes of MugenCast, and I was like, this is pretty good. Like, this is pretty cool. And I was starting to gain more confidence in what I was building and what it could be in the future. And then simultaneously, along with this, there's a lot of simultaneouslys in this. I was also, what was I doing in this? I was also doing like the fashion side of Mugen. If you guys are OG, like MugenCast listeners or just followers of my my Instagram page, you'll know I used to do like fashion and outfits and stuff like that as my main thing. Like that was what I did instead of photography. But then I decided to make the switch to photography maybe somewhere around late 2017, early 2018. I started taking it more seriously, just like the photography part of it. And I switched over. But before that, I was doing this internship and I was thinking like, why am I going back and forth to this? Like, I'm only doing this to put something extra on my resume. I'm only doing this because it feels like I have to. It's not something I actually want to do. And that's when it kind of hit me that I don't really need to kind of just take things lying down. Like I have a platform. I have people who enjoy what I say. I have people who are interested in what I do. So why am I just going to this internship to be, abused for, 4 or 5 hours a day and not get paid? That's a key to it. There was no money involved. It was an unpaid internship, unfortunately. And when I thought about this, I was like, yeah, I'm not coming back. I'm not doing this anymore. I remember my boss asked me like, oh, do you want to do you want to come back next semester? Can you stay a few extra days? This was near the end of fall semester, in December. I was like, no, absolutely not. And I started to take what I was doing more seriously, and this created a trend over the past or the coming years where there was possible job opportunities in terms of internships and stuff like that I could have taken, but I decided not to take them because I would rather work on my own thing. I would rather be doing Mugen and be allocating my free time to getting better at photography, getting better at this whole social media content creation thing, which sounds kind of crazy in a way. But one thing I realized was that And I realize this more and more each day. I feel like maybe I'm not sure if you guys are kind of fall into this category, but we kind of cling to those jobs and things like that just for stability, and whether it's financial or just in terms of life and having a routine, we cling to that somewhat. And it kind of frustrates me when I do that, because I feel like I'm so much more than just a job. I'm so much more than just a number or just a random person behind a desk. Especially when I have a good idea that I could be pursuing. There's no way I'm going to stop doing that just for someone else's goal. I'd rather be building my own. So that was kind of like the first step of me kind of creating like this, not necessarily rebel, but just individualized approach to life and thinking about it in that type of lens. So that was a really big point in MugenCast for me, where I decided, and just my overall brand in general, where I decided, like, this could be something. I don't necessarily have to just allocate my time to the dreams and desires of other people. I can chase my own, which is very huge. And I think if you haven't made a similar type of realization, you don't have to have it in the same way I did. I suggest you sit down and think about that for a little bit. So let's see what else. Oh, so my first podcast, I did 2 of these with my friend John and my friend Ellie. This was back in like the summer of 2017. Yeah, I think the summer of 2017, before I started that internship. My friend John and my friend Ellie and I, we all sat down and did an episode. It was the first time I had guests on an episode, and literally it was so ghetto. It was in the same room that I'm in right now, but it was me sitting in the chair, John sitting in another chair, Ellie sitting on just like my bed right here, and one microphone just dropped right in the middle between us, and our faces maybe like a foot, 2 feet apart from each other, and us just trying to kind of make sure the audio picks up and everything, and we're all talking at the same time. It was ridiculous. Like, it was so stupid. But it was so much fun. I enjoyed. That was and it still is one of my favorite episodes I've ever made of MugenCast. And it's funny, it didn't have anything to do with creativity. We just talked about life, what we were going through, relationships with other people, and just the stage of life we're in and what we want life to be in the future. It's funny, I want to send that episode to them maybe like 3-4 years from now, when we're, nearing like our 30s and see if like the goals we set up, if we actually achieve them, because it wasn't a super serious conversation, but it was a very meaningful conversation. I know they felt it. I felt it as well. A lot of people liked that episode. I think it was one of the first episodes that kind of got this podcast on the map in a way, and got it to a lot of people's podcast feeds. So that was a really big moment for this podcast as well, knowing that I could have these type of conversations with people, and in a way I could motivate them and I could motivate myself. It just seemed like a really cool, just reciprocal relationship. And I was like, I want to keep doing this. I want to keep having on guests. I want to keep having these type of conversations. And I think the essence of podcasts is basically just good conversations that people might have had otherwise, but they decide to record them and share them with other people. I think that's about the essence of what I do. The topic, of course, is very specific and narrowed down depending on what podcast you're listening to. Of course, I'm creativity, but in any field, whether it's a sports podcast or a philosophy or whatever, it's just people talking about things that are near and dear to them that they feel like other people should know, and talking about those topics with other people who share their same views, or maybe don't share their same views. That's all it is. It's just a big conversation that people are having that other people listen to. That's podcasting in a nutshell to me. And I think the best podcasts, ones that I've listened to, they always have that sociable kind of nature to them. That it's conversational, it's banter back and forth. I never do serious like sit down interviews. It's always supposed to be fun and enjoyable, and that podcast with Ellie and John really taught me that. So amazing episode. If I can find it, I'll link it in the show notes down below. I'm not sure if I will be able to, because that episode is like deep back in my archives. Digital Disaster, episode 23. So this is a while ago, but not super long ago, I guess I should say. This was the episode I did. I'm not sure if I was kind of feeling down or what, but I was just feeling like I had a lot to say, which I always do, but even more than usual. And it basically was about the digital world ruining or disrupting regular life and regular ongoings and human interactions. And I just started to feel that what I was doing was it was very forced. It wasn't real. It was fake, honestly. And I think it turned me off from creating for a while. And I think that episode, you could hear some of my discontent with what I was doing and some of the, I guess you could say, emotional or just barriers I was kind of running up against. But it helped my development by realizing that as entertaining as I wanted to be with, the things I put out, there had to be some type of value behind it. There had to be some type of genuine creative lesson behind a lot of the things I was doing in order for me to not feel that burnt out feeling and feel like I was just faking everything. I never wanted to feel like I was one of those people who just put out content just to adhere to a certain, algorithm or, have success in just a niche. I want something that I like creating that my viewers liked, and it had to always be that balance. And of course, what the platform that I'm working on likes as well. So it's like that. It's like a triangle almost, I guess you could say. And I felt like I was just leaning too much towards what other people maybe wanted to see and what the platform demanded of me rather than what I wanted to do as a creator. And it made me think like, this world that we're living in right now, that's how so many people base their content, how so many people create their brands. It's only around, what's forced on them. It's not their own genuine interests. And because of that, I feel like we lost touch with a lot of reality, honestly, and a lot of human